And of course, we had the Hawaii one just a week ago. And just in the last few days, there's a small town called Enterprise in Northwest Territories that was completely devastated, over 90 to 95% destroyed. So this is an ongoing trend. So I like the calling it the Pyrocene, the age of fires, and it seems like a new regime. I mean, anybody fighting these fires is saying these fires are burning hotter, they're traveling faster, there's much less warning, they're causing much more catastrophic damage.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Climate Emergency Forum. My name is Regina, and I'll be your host as we discuss the age of fire, the Pyrocene. You know, when I was growing up, I was raised in a religious household, and I remember hearing, biblically speaking, that we would all be judged and the earth would, and everything on it would go up in a ball of flames. And I never thought in my wildest dreams that we humans would actually make this come true. But it seems that that is what we're doing. And of course, I'm talking today, it's August 16th, 2023, about the disaster in Maui, the disaster in Paradise. And this is not the first paradisal disaster we've seen. We've discussed in an episode before a fire in Paradise, and that Paradise was in California. This town was all but burned off the map. And now we have actual Paradise in a beautiful, beautiful place in the world, Hawaii. I mean, I have to tell you, I just never thought that anything like this would happen. I mean, of course, we're living in the Anthropocene or the Pyrocene, and we're starting to get used to multiple back-to-back disasters, but still things don't stop shocking me. I mean, this is Hawaii. It's an island in the middle of an ocean. How can it just burn up? But as of today, there are 106 people that are confirmed dead. Now, only 5 of those have been identified. Shocking, terrifying news. I won't even say statistics. A week after the fire, people are still laboring under intermittent power shortages, and communication is still very difficult on the island. It's it kind of brings me back to Katrina, when everything just fell apart in New Orleans, and everyone watched as this disaster unfolded, and they were just in shock. How can this be happening in a first world country? First world. Well, you know, climate change, it does discriminate, and at the same time, it doesn't discriminate. What does that mean? Yes, it's harder for some communities than for others, but even wealthy countries such as the United States and wealthy communities such as Hawaii will be caught unawares and will have great difficulty facing the horrors that are unfolding and will continue to unfold. And I know, Peter, you've done a lot of research into fires that we can expect to see in this time of great upheaval, this time of climate change. And I wonder how this aligns with your research in terms of fires due to global warming.
Well, thanks, Regina. Yeah, actually, what I've been doing for some years now is periodically looking at the excellent resource that we have from NASA firms, the big fire map, which they put out every day. It's a fire management system. So yeah, and the fires have been getting worse and worse and worse. No question about that. I posted actually on the 8th. I looked into what was behind the Maui terrible, horrible fire, and discovered that it was very hot there, and that it was in drought, that it had been in drought for quite a while, and the maximum region of drought was right over Lahaina. Now, maybe that's coincidence, but that's absolutely where it was. I was very glad and very encouraged that Professor Michael Mann has been putting in some pretty good Facebook, Twitter quotes recently. So what he said was, what we're seeing in Maui is a compound climate catastrophe. We really, as a civilization, as a society, as a people, we really need to do some soul searching here, my friends. We're into the age of catastrophic climate change. Disasters will increase from now on. I've been presenting for several years on the climate indicator saying everything is getting worse faster. Well, now everything on planet Earth is getting worse faster. And it's getting worse faster for two reasons. Because of my generation, what we have done, what we have not cared about, what we have not been sensitive to, what we have not been interested in. It's us. We're doing this. The media reports these things as though, oh, they happened, and these are the details. We've got to, as I say, look inside ourselves and look into these disasters. What is it going to take for our leaders, our governments, for us, our people, society, to really respond to any of these horrific catastrophes that we're seeing day after day on our screen? I don't know. We're doing the best we can, our team here, and there's another team who's doing a similar thing, facing future. I don't know, what more can we do? In Canada, we have a monumental climate catastrophe going on, a massive climate catastrophe, which of course is the fires that have been raging now for months and are going to continue burning. So right now, on the 15th of August, we have 52,500 square miles of boreal forest burning in Canada. And the day before, it was 1,500 square miles less. 24 hours. The raging fires in Canadian boreal forest increased by 1,500 square miles. It's looking as though this will definitely be one of the world's worst free fires ever. And it could definitely become the world's worst. And why I'm saying that is that this is the boreal that's burning. And the boreal is Russia, Siberia, Canada, Scandinavia. And it's burning right across. There are huge fires now in Siberia and in the Russian boreal. Copernicus, the European monitor organization, put out a notice last week that the boreal forest is burning more and faster than it ever has before. The boreal is a very, very, very special place. It's a very special place for biodiversity, for all kinds of birds and animals, other creatures. So what I discovered was that there was a paper published in 2022 called Global Trends of Forest Loss Due to Fire from 2001 to 2019. And the research team used that incredibly fabulous satellite resource at the University of Maryland. So what this research discovered, absolutely crucial, most important research, is that the forest fires worldwide are increasing, and they have increased a lot. Now, I mention this because it's only a few years ago that the scientists and we could not be absolutely certain about forest fires. There was all kinds of information and theories going about. But this very comprehensive study was quite definite. In the past 20 years, forest fires have approximately doubled. We're burning down twice the amount of forest than we were just 20 years ago. That's like yesterday. Now, here's a really shocking thing. The vast majority, like almost 90% of the fires and the increase in fires is from the boreal. It's a massive, massive amount of forest that's being lost in the boreal. And I absolutely shocked. I didn't realize that it could be so much higher than all the other fires, of course, that we hear about. Fires that are lit in Africa and South America and Amazon fires. Well, there's nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to how much of the boreal is burning. We will not survive without the boreal carbon sink. We've destroyed the carbon sink of the tropical forests. They're actually not sinking carbon anymore. We're left with the boreal. It is a shocking, large piece of scientific evidence. So, time to take some deep thinking, I believe.
Thank you, Peter. Your question of what will it take, it actually a little bit terrifies me, because as we here are all appalled, I think our culture has been so accustomed to just being observers, just passive observers, watching this endless scroll on CNN, MSNBC, Fox. And it's almost like we're watching a video game. I feel as though humans have become so desensitized to what they see that this is yet just another thing, and it becomes the new normal. And where is the alarm? Where is the fear? Where is the upset? I am listening to the fact that authorities in Hawaii are asking families of those who are missing to provide DNA to help hopefully find their loved ones through DNA. To not hear this and be shaken makes me wonder about our humanity. And I know that you have some things to say on this topic, Paul. You've done some research in terms of like how hot the fire is burning. And so I'd love to hear what you have to say on that.
Yes, thank you, Regina and Peter. So these fires are part of a worsening trend, of course. People remember, and Regina mentioned the Paradise, California fire, which was triggered by falling power lines that were live, creating sparks, igniting a region that was in months and months of drought. And the fire, of course, overtook the town of Paradise, and people were in their cars and trying to escape. And there was huge casualties for that fire. A few years ago, that was in 2018. A few years ago, there was the Lytton, British Columbia fire, probably sparked by sparks from a train passing. So the metal wheels on the metal track, sparks, very, very dry, high winds. Those conditions are what are triggering these catastrophic fires. And of course, we had the Hawaii one just a week ago. And just in the last few days, there's a small town called Enterprise in Northwest Territories that was completely devastated, over 90 to 95% destroyed. So this is an ongoing trend. So I like the calling it the Pyrocene, the age of fires. And it seems like a new regime. I mean, anybody fighting these fires is saying these fires are burning hotter, they're traveling faster, there's much less warning, they're causing much more catastrophic damage. And as Peter's mentioned, they're burning much more area. I mean, in Canada, we're like 13, 14 million hectares burned. And, as Peter said, he was talking in square miles. But we're getting a huge increase in the devastation. So what actually happened in Hawaii, it was a confluence of factors mostly caused by or worsened by climate change. So we had Hurricane Dora south of Hawaii, so a very, very powerful hurricane. It was category 4. It was quite far off the Hawaiian Islands, about 500 miles, but it combined with a high pressure area north of Hawaii, the winds generated were quite high. And of course, the drought that's been ongoing in parts of Hawaii for several months dried out all of the vegetation, most notably probably these invasive grasses that when in the wet season, they can grow like 6 inches per day. So they're, with drought, I mean, it was basically just fuel and kindling for these fires. The very high winds that were generated by the combination of high and low pressure were generated up over the mountains and then came down slope. And it created basically a blast furnace effect, which just incinerated very quickly anything in its path, including melting metal, the metal rims of cars, aluminum in the engine blocks, basically incinerating the vehicles, the houses, and anybody in them. And there were lots of people in there because the sirens didn't go off. Internet was down, so people didn't have advance warning. So as you mentioned, the fatalities are 106, but that number is just sort of an interim number. There's over 1,200 people missing, and I, wonder how do you go missing on a small island? They know the people that have left from the airplane registries. This is going to go on for months. I think the death toll is going to increase. It could end up being well over 1,000 people. And how do you find out which people died? I mean, the dogs don't really smell the cadavers. People are basically turned to ash. They're incinerated. I actually called a local funeral home and managed to speak to somebody who's in charge of cremations, and got some technical information on body temperatures, temperatures that they use to incinerate dead bodies for cremations, etc. And these fires in the blast furnace of Lahaina exceeded those temperatures. So there's really nothing left of people. They can take a sample of ash from the driver's seat, passenger seats of cars, and analyze them for DNA and get traces of DNA to identify, who was there, but there's not much else they can do apart from that. So, it's a horrifying situation, and it's part of a general trend. We can expect to see more and more of this as temperature continues to rise and, as climate change continues to accelerate. So it's just horrifying.
It's very horrifying, Paul. And as you were speaking about, well, I hate to say it, but essentially everyone and everything being incinerated in this fire, me as a New Yorker, I couldn't help but go back to 9/11. And of course, we know what happened then and what happened to the people as well. It's not dissimilar. The reaction was quite different. The United States is arguably still at war, but then something like this can happen. And the response is, it just seems the response is rather passive in comparison. It goes back to Peter's question, what does it take for us to respond to this incredible emergency? Or will we be the proverbial frog in the pot, just sitting there as the water heats up and heats up and heats up and just boils us to death? Perhaps that's our fate. I really just don't know. Peter, is that our fate? What do you think?
Yeah, Regina, I think the frog in the pot is a great analogy. It's not true. Frogs are not that stupid. They're not that dumb. When the water gets too hot, they jump out. Well, apparently our society, our civilization is dumber than any frog. So I'll pose again, what's it going to take? Well, it's going to take two things. It's going to take all of us individually to think hard and sensitively and look at these images of the horror, as Paul so sensibly described the situation that we see. We have to feel that that is close to our home. We have to feel that we're at one with all of humanity. So we have to feel that those people who have been incinerated by this global warming, heating driven fire, we have to feel as though they are our relatives, our friends. That's the first thing we have to do. But the second thing on what does it take is this: one catastrophe after another, another, in different regions of the planet, very much in the Northern Hemisphere. No response from those people who are in control, who run the show, who are influential and responsible. Nothing, except worse than nothing, because our leaders, the people that we have elected to political office, our institutions, they support continuing status quo. Our governments, in the face of these horrors, horrors on a massive scale all around the world are doing worse than nothing. They're supporting, encouraging, and subsidizing more fossil fuels. Now, my final comment will be, and people will have heard this from me, human beings are capable of tremendous achievements, wonderful things. They're also capable of terrible, terrible evil. We are seeing the greatest evil that's ever happened in relation to human beings or human civilization in the world in all our history. Revolution. We need to think about our children. We need to think about the young people. There is a response of sorts because there's a lot of litigation going on. So there was a recent win by a group of young people in Montana. One of the most terrible things, though, and makes this evil even worse, in my view, is that every single case that brought by these young people all over the world has been instantly fought by their government. Instantly fought as though these young people were criminals. The United States one that has been going on for 12 years, which started in Oregon with a good result from Judge Aiken, but the federal government has absolutely sabotaged, demolished their case. My final word then is that in this case, 2 years ago, when the young people, our Children's Trust, a great group of lawyers, they were told by the Attorney General's legal team, you have no right to a safe future. They were told that. Are we going to act as if that's true? We need to have more than a rebellion here. It's time for revolution. Now, I'm not talking about bombs and things like that, right? I'm talking about how all revolutions start, with sensitivity, with groups of people getting together, with putting out the facts, putting out the feelings, and deciding what can be done to overturn the status quo, which is completely destroying our future and leaving our children today with what the IPCC calls an unlivable future. Well, that translates to a hell on earth. That's what that is.
Thank you so much for that sober assessment, Peter. And what do you think, Paul? Is what Peter said a little bit too doom and gloom?
Well, I think we all know who the real culprit is. We know that, it's the way our society has depended on fossil fuels for the last 150 years, and it's causing us grief now because it's changed the chemistry of the atmosphere and oceans, so that the physics is different for the planet, the way heat is transferred. And, I still think that if nothing else wakes up people when there's global food shortages, because there's huge simultaneous crop failures around the world, say in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe that would be sort of the tipping point. People will say, we've had enough. What can we do? Getting back to the, incineration, the blast furnace, I think is a very good analogy for what happened in the town in Maui, because you've got the mountains just to one side of the town, and the oceans, of course, on the other side. And you had tremendous drought there for 2 months, and then you had 50-mile-an-hour winds and huge amounts of kindling, dried grass, etc., from plantations that stopped operation a number of years ago. So some spark, I think there's speculation that the winds knocked down power lines. There's some videos showing that, sparks, whatever initiated it. Wasn't lightning, that's for sure. But whatever triggered it, the fire moved extremely fast through the town. The town has a tremendous amount of history, many buildings well over 100 years old, most buildings wood in the town. There were several thousand structures that were destroyed, multiple cars, of course, along the coastal road. There was only an escape route to the north and to the southeast, only 2 escape routes, and the traffic jams, so people just left their cars and went into the ocean, the people that managed to survive. A lot of the heat, huge convection going up from the heat, and huge infrared radiation, heat from the fire, some of which would carry back to the mountain slopes. So the winds that came down the mountains would be further heated. It was quite a hot day, and the whole system kind of just built on itself and then reached temperatures that were high enough to basically melt metal and certainly, incinerate flesh, incinerate bones, basically remove all traces of living people and the animals that were there. And it's really, going to be a very, very long time before they find out, exactly, how many people perished, basically. So just a horrendous catastrophe, but not unique. It's happened before, and it will happen again. People need to think about their town where they live, what the buildings are made of. Are they in a wildland urban interface, so-called WUI, W-U-I? And if so, if you have drought for several months and high winds, how secure are you in your town? Because, climate change doesn't care who you or I are. I talk about being in the climate casino, and, people are disproportionately affected around the world, but there's more and more cases and more people affected, and more people, losing their homes, their jobs, their livelihoods, their entire towns. So we're in a world of consequences from what climate change can bring, and I argue it's going to get a lot worse in the next few years. And just posted a video last night to that effect based on James Hansen's latest work.
Thank you so much for closing the show, Paul. And I really appreciate your mentioning all of the non-human animals who also perished, who we so often forget as if they never even existed and never even mattered. I think this is part of the mental disease that we humans have. We seem to regard life as meaningless, but I don't even know if we regard it as life or as something to be counted. Hopefully, humanity can have a vast spiritual, ethical, moral awakening, and we can begin to see the effect that we're having on all living beings, the misery that we're bringing to the planet, and right our wrongs, because our lives and everyone else's life depends on it. So thank you very much for those of you who are still with us. This was a very important show. We thank you for staying to the end. We thank you for being subscribers. We thank you for liking and sharing this video. And we encourage you to share your comments about this topic. So please do share. We love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for joining us for another Climate Emergency Forum.